That clicking noise, a short story from the book, The Theater of Magic by Rafael Cosentino. Dr. Lucas Bennett had been practicing psychiatry for over 2 decades, and in all his years of clinical work, he couldn't remember feeling more electrified than he did that Friday morning. After passing through base security, he walked through the sprawling military complex with a kick in his step. This was his 8th visit, an evaluation requested by the military for one of their own. His patient, Army Specialist Emily Harris, was a woman whose resilience and strength he'd learned to admire over their previous sessions. The sun beat down on his face, and the West Texas heat carried the distant sounds of marching and orders being shouted as military vehicles drove past. As he walked towards the base detention center where they would meet, his mind wrestled with maintaining the delicate balance between his growing affection and his duty as a psychiatrist. Although it didn't happen often, he was emotionally invested in the case. He'd made a discovery that could transform his patient's life, which excited him profoundly. In fact, he'd be hard-pressed to cite another example of identifying the root cause of a patient's mental paralysis so precisely. He'd spent the last few weeks investigating everything he'd learned from their sessions. He spoke to colleagues, performed extensive database research, and studied dozens of similar cases. A couple of nights ago, he stumbled upon an exact match. He walked past Echo Barracks and smiled, realizing he was the only person here not wearing fatigues. As he entered the detention facility, a pair of stern-faced security personnel motioned for him to stop. They rifled through his bag with methodical indifference, their brusque manner grating against his nerves. The doctor was permitted entrance into the detention center only after a burly MP patted him down. The doctor was escorted down the usual hallway to the same sparsely furnished office where he waited for his patient to arrive. A white noise machine hummed in the corner of the room. After a few minutes, another MP stepped down the hallway, escorting a woman wearing a chocolate-brown prisoner uniform. She had medium-length black hair, and it shined in the fluorescent light. Her eyes were kind but defeated, and when he looked at her, he felt compelled to feel sorry for her. But neither pity nor mercy was part of his job. "Hello, Emily," the doctor said as he greeted her. "Good morning," she replied with a genuine smile. She took a deep breath and relaxed as if this was all routine. And it was. The office smelled like lemon cleanser and static electricity. The only sound was the hollow whoosh of the white noise machine humming away. "It's so nice to see you," the doctor said as he retrieved a laptop. He began moving his fingers across the keyboard. "How are you feeling?" he asked without looking up. "I think stable," she answered, staring at the doctor's face, which was now illuminated, and the laptop screen reflected on his glasses. "As usual, I will audio record this." "Of course," she replied, studying the shape and color of his teeth. The doctor pressed the button on a small tape recorder. "Today is Friday, June 20th, 2003. This is Dr. Lucas Bennett, and I'm with Army Specialist Emily Harris at the Fort Bliss Detention Center." He fiddled with his laptop's touchpad, looking for the similar cases he discovered. He thought about an ideal way to structure this critical session, which he suspected might be their last. "When I got your message about today's session, I began to feel hopeful," the woman said, breaking the silence. "I'm excited to know what you've learned." The doctor looked up. "That's wonderful to hear. I believe you're ready to understand the root cause of your experiences. I mentioned that I have access to a national database of psychiatric cases. I don't always find relevant data that can be used to identify a patient's symptoms or accelerate their progress. 2 days ago, I found something that matches your case more precisely than anything I've seen in my career." I was dumbfounded. The woman's eyes lit up, and she shifted in her chair, staring at him, but her mind was reeling in anticipation. "Here's what I think we should do. First, I want to summarize everything we've discussed over the past 2 months. This review is critical for you. Then I'd like to share what I've learned and how I believe it relates to what's happening to you. Take me back to the first time you can remember hearing the clicking noise. Tell me where you were and what you experienced." The women nodded, stared at the ceiling, and then spoke. "I was commuting to work on a bus as I always had. It was a Tuesday, and it was my mother's birthday. The doctor stared without blinking. I called her on my cell phone, and we spoke briefly. As my bus approached the city, I noticed a large hole in one of the twin towers. Black smoke was billowing out. I asked my mother to turn on the news to see what happened, but she didn't see anything. Everyone on the bus was looking and pointing, and I knew something was terribly wrong. We were much closer just a few minutes later as the bus rounded the bend to enter the Lincoln Tunnel. The whole bus was staring at the smoking tower across the Hudson River when I noticed a commercial airplane flying low and fast. It appeared to pass behind the towers, but I saw an explosion appear on the other side where the plane should have reappeared. The fireball moved up the side of the building. I heard people on the bus scream and gasp. An alarm went off in my mind, and I knew I had to record what I saw because I was witnessing something catastrophic. That's when I began to hear the clicking noise. I realized the noise was coming from inside my head, but it wouldn't stop. I watched the fireball rise over the towers and heard the other passengers screaming. The clicking noise continued for around 30 seconds as I processed what I saw and heard. I don't know what shocked me more: the plane crashing into the building, the realization people were dying, the screaming on the bus, or the clicking noise. You've said several times now that you had to record what you saw but didn't have a video camera, correct? No, Lucas, I did not have a camera, his patient replied as if she answered the question 100 times. And what does the clicking noise sound like? Well, it's a little like one of those old reel-to-reel film projectors we had in grade school, the woman said as she made a turning motion with her hands and rolled her tongue on the top of her mouth, making a fast clicking noise through her teeth. The doctor perked up. Now we're getting somewhere. And Emily, when was the second time you heard the clicking noise? She pulled one leg under the other and made herself more comfortable. It was the same day, about 30 minutes later, she replied. When I got to work at Herald Square, the streets were frantic. It was pure chaos. People were yelling and trying to use their cell phones, but they weren't working. I heard sirens everywhere. In front of my office building, a colleague told me he was going home to get his pregnant wife. They lived just 2 blocks from the World Trade Center, across from Battery Park. I had to see what was happening and agreed to go with him at least part of the way. There were police, fire trucks, ambulances, sirens, people running in every direction. We moved quickly down 9th Avenue toward the smoking towers, and the closer we got, the worse things looked. We saw people crying, people screaming and running. It was a real horror show. By the time we made it to 18th Street, we could plainly see people falling from the towers. Their bodies seemed to tumble down the length of the buildings. The woman's eyes became teary, and her voice shook. The doctor curled his lip. "Take your time," he said. "We just stood there watching," she said through tears. The people around us were watching this happen. Many were crying. Some were praying. An older woman standing in the street next to me began to vomit uncontrollably, and I heard a jet plane in the sky moving closer. That's when the clicking noise started again. It was louder that time. I saw more bodies falling from the towers. They were dying, and the woman was vomiting. Just then, the jet plane streaked across the sky. It was a fighter jet. There must have been 100 people standing in the street, and I remember seeing the crowd turn their heads toward that fighter jet. I watched their faces move in unison as it streaked across the sky. The ground shook, and I could smell the woman's vomit. I recorded all that while the clicking noise played. I was frozen with fear. The doctor's head jerked a little, but he straightened himself out. "But again, you didn't have a camera with you." No, it was a feeling I had, a sensation. I needed to record what I'd witnessed to prevent it from happening to others. The woman was not smiling anymore. Her face was at rest, almost falling. But something in her eyes was determined to hold on to the notion that the doctor sitting across the desk could free her from the burden. "And when was the third time you heard the clicking noise?" The woman rolled her head around her neck and spoke. "My cell phone finally started working, and I got a call from another friend who also worked in the city. The situation on the streets deteriorated. It was mayhem, and we had to leave immediately. They were evacuating people, and we agreed to meet at Chelsea Piers, where the ferry would take us across the Hudson to Hoboken. The doctor handed the woman a tissue. She cleaned her eyes and blew her nose. While crossing the Hudson on the ferry, we saw the tower collapse. It was almost right in front of us. I realized that the steel skyscraper I'd been inside so many times was crumbling. And I knew I was watching people die. Maybe thousands. People on the ferry were crying, screaming out to God. And then another jet fighter streaked across the sky. That's when the clicking noise started playing again. I watched the people around me gasping and crying in horror. The woman stopped momentarily to take a deep breath, but the doctor motioned for her to continue. From Hoboken, they evacuated us to Giant Stadium in New Jersey. From there, we could see all of downtown. It was this huge ball of smoke and dust. You couldn't see the jets anymore, but we could hear them. The doctor moved his jaw back and forth to process his thoughts. That was really something you witnessed. Every time you describe it, I can feel the gravity. And I can understand why it made a permanent impression in your mind's eye. So many people suffered terribly that day. When was the fourth time you heard the clicking noise? The first 3 times happened that day, but the fourth time happened 14 months later, 4 months ago. I enlisted in the military. I felt compelled to prevent anything like that from happening again. A lot of people felt the same. After basic training, I was deployed to Afghanistan. My unit was assigned to the Tangi Valley. That's the Maiden Mordak province, a valley about 20 kilometers from Kabul. It's an ugly, dark place. I was already scared out of my mind, and the place looked like a nightmare. The valley is surrounded by these jagged, saw-tooth-looking mountains infested by insurgents, and those people don't care whether they live or die. They're uneducated, violent, hate-filled religious fanatics teeming with small arms, RPGs, and IEDs, but they want to capture you alive so they can cut your head off. I got used to feeling scared, and time passed. Lots of time. But 4 months ago, I was asked to join another unit that was collecting intel on a suspected Taliban bunker located underneath a house. We drove to a small shanty village. Trash and clothes were blowing all over the streets. It was very windy, and I usually love the wind, but not that day. There were packs of wild dogs and sickly-looking people eating trash on the road. Everything was hard to look at. A British soldier was speaking on the radio to confirm that he'd spotted a group of 6 Taliban soldiers. He confirmed they had light arms and RPGs, and we watched them walk inside the bunker house. I remember seeing a silver and gold Rolls-Royce pull up to the house. "What about the car?" the doctor asked, referring to his notes. Seeing such an expensive car parked next to that metal shack was strange, the woman replied. Then we got an unusual call. One of the units confirmed that a man inside the house was a Taliban leader named Mullah Umar Maktoum, a high-value leadership target. We were asked to paint the house so air support could drop a JDAM. Our unit was behind a rock wall about a quarter-mile away, and I asked to look through the spotter's binoculars. I could see movement in the house. I watched for a minute as we waited. As I heard the F-18s overhead, I saw 3 children leave the house, and they were laughing and smiling and holding hands. The woman's breathing became labored. Her abdomen quivered. She used the sleeve of her prisoner uniform to wipe the tears welling up in her eyes. The doctor stood up and handed her a tissue. "Take your time," he said softly. I saw the children, but I knew it was too late to do anything, so I just watched. As the roar of the jets moved above us, the clicking noise started again, and it was louder than ever before. I watched those children get vaporized and realized we were the bad guys. The clicking noise was still playing in my head when the bomb's shockwave hit us. I cried uncontrollably. That was the first time the clicking noise paralyzed me. I couldn't control myself. I curled into a ball. That's when the obsession started. Then, the clicking noise began playing when I was alone or watching TV. It would happen when I was eating, using the bathroom, anywhere. Each time I heard it, I was overcome with terror. It was happening 3 or 4 times a day. I began to fear it would happen every waking moment. I was paralyzed with terror. Emily, did you take money from the wreckage of the Rolls-Royce after the airstrike? No, I did not take any money. I didn't even know about that, she replied. I don't remember the moments after the shockwave hit me. I was curled up in a ball. The doctor looked unconvinced. As you know, the others in the operation claimed they didn't see any children. Of course, they said that. She shot back, shaking her head. They told me to stop saying I saw children, and when I wouldn't, I became their enemy. The doctor made notes on the same legal pad and then pointed at her with the pen. And then there's this duffel bag that allegedly contained $6 million, a bribe intended for the Taliban leaders, or at least this is what your superiors tell me. Allegedly, the bag has still not been recovered. They tell me several others are under investigation. I took nothing, the woman screamed. I don't care about money. I've told you that repeatedly. Then why did you steal Corporal Simon's passport? Why did you impersonate her? Why did you get on the C-130 to London and then take a commercial flight back to the U.S.? Where did you get the money to buy a plane ticket to Newark? I've answered those questions, she pleaded. Emily, the doctor roared, then calmed himself. Tell me again. The woman sniffled and pulled in a deep, cleansing breath. I thought I was going crazy. My life had turned into a waking nightmare. I was always disoriented, but kept it hidden from my superiors. I started hearing the clicking noise constantly. It was torture. I had to get out of there. I was a danger to myself and those around me. I had enough sense to take Simon's passport and the transport plane to London. My mother wired me the plane fare. You know the rest. They arrested me at the Newark airport. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. They charged me with desertion and impersonation. They didn't find any money, but if I had not been making noise about the murder of those children, do you think I would have been accused of stealing money? I don't know, the doctor replied. Have you seen any evidence that there was a bag of money? She asked. No, he admitted after a moment. Nor have I seen evidence that any children were killed in that operation. The only sound was the humming of the white noise machine. The doctor sat up in his chair and grabbed his laptop. It's time for me to share what I've learned. This question may be strange, but I want you to take it at face value. Emily, have you ever seen a movie called The Twilight Zone? It's not the original black and white series, but a feature-length movie released in 1983. You might have been around 10 years old when you saw it. Yes, I do remember that movie. Well then, you know that the movie was a series of stories. Do you remember the story titled Nightmare at 20,000 Feet? It takes place on a commercial flight. There's a monster on the wing. They're in a fierce thunderstorm. Yes, I saw that, the woman said, cutting him off. The doctor's eyes lit up. Tell me what you remember about that story. Well, like you said, they were flying through a horrible storm, and there was a strange creature on the plane's wing, and it was causing damage to the plane's engine. A passenger seated by the window saw what the creature was doing. He knew the creature would cause the plane to crash. The passenger got hysterical, and the crew tried to calm him down, but he grabbed a gun strapped to the leg of an air marshal, and he shot out the window of the plane, trying to kill the creature. The cabin depressurizes, debris and passengers start flying around the cabin, and the plane goes into a nosedive. The woman's eyes suddenly became very wide, as did the doctor's. Her body became erect, as if she'd woken up. Yes, the jet's engines were roaring. The people in the cabin are screaming. And then a camera drops from the plane's ceiling and begins to record what's happening to the people inside. The woman clasped her hands together aggressively. Jesus, of course. Like a projector, the camera that drops down shines light on everything it sees in the plane's cabin. It makes a clicking noise while it's recording. That's the clicking noise. How could you know this? She asked excitedly. And what's the feeling you get when you think about that camera dropping from the ceiling to record everything? It's too late to help anyone. They're all going to die. And the camera's only purpose now is to record their deaths. What does the camera do with the recording, Emily? The camera sends what it sees to the plane's black box. So when the wreckage is found, humanity can understand how they died. The doctor nodded his head positively. Exactly, he said softly. In the psychiatric database, I found 14 other cases that report associations between the events of September 11th and that scene in the movie Twilight Zone. Some people associate a sound or an idea with a movie. Still, unlike you, most of those patients made a conscious connection between the movie and the events of that terrible day. Because you never made the connection, it became an obsessive disorder. The other thing your mind may know is that while filming that movie, there was a scene where a helicopter malfunctioned and decapitated 3 actors, 1 adult and 2 children. Did you know that? Yes, I remember that. Many years ago, while in high school, I saw something on television about that accident and got a strange feeling about the movie. The doctor smiled profoundly. I want to read you a transcript from a patient in one of the cases I found. The doctor looked at his laptop and began reading. I remember seeing the camera drop from the ceiling and becoming aware that even though those people were going to die, mankind needed to record what had gone wrong to prevent it from happening to others. I was a kid then, but that scene was my first realization that even while people were dying, mankind needed to record what was happening, which terrified me. That quote is precisely what you told me about the first time you heard the clicking noise, about your need to record it. But the quote is from a woman who lives in Virginia Beach. She's your exact age, too. What's interesting about this group phenomenon is that it's what psychiatrists call a psychosocial crisis or mass trauma. When smaller groups are affected by the same input, it's often called a cluster trauma. Each of the 14 documented cases is about your age. That's not a coincidence. All 15 of you saw that movie at a highly impressionable point in your mind's development, and it left a permanent mark. The woman shook her head in astonishment. That scene and the ideas presented are horrific for an adult, but particularly impactful on young minds. I think about the 3 children you think you saw die, and the 3 people killed on the film set. I can't help but think there's a connection. Our minds are incredible things. They take in things we don't think about consciously. Obsessing over those concepts can create a permanent fear in your subconscious mind. That's a little like the plane's black box, which records everything for future playback. The plane, the camera, the idea that you had to record people dying, the real helicopter accident on the film set. When you first heard the clicking noise, your mind's eye was just playing back the association because you saw a real plane hit that building, and what you were seeing was something that had gone horribly wrong. I really get it now, she offered the doctor in a thankful tone. The woman breathed in and out several times very deliberately while she processed the realization. Now that you understand the association your mind created, you no longer have to be scared of the clicking noise. Emily, there's nothing wrong with your mind's black box. As a matter of fact, it's in prime working order. Your subconscious mind created a noise your conscious mind could hear. It scared you so much that the clicking noise became an obsession, and you panicked. That's how it became a disorder. Now you know the noise was something scary you saw in a movie as a kid. There is nothing wrong with you or your mind. Our minds are complex, and we must accept that we cannot control what gets recorded or when it gets played back. Does this mean I was justified? The woman asked. The doctor shrugged his shoulders. That's not for me to decide, Emily. I'm here to assess whether you had a psychotic break. Now that I found the other cases, I can say with some certainty that something did break in your mind. When this happens, no one can know how the mind will react. Thank you for everything, the woman said in a tone that brought the doctor a deep sense of gratification. The two stood, smiled, and embraced for the first time in their 8 weeks together. They stared into each other's eyes for a moment. They said their goodbyes, and the doctor was escorted out. The MP escorted the women down a long fluorescent hallway. Reaching the end of the hallway, the MP unlocked a door. She took in the moment, realizing the new beginning the doctor had gifted. She walked to a payphone at the far end of the dormitory, picked up the receiver, and pushed some buttons. Collect call from Emily. The operator made the connection. Yes, I'll accept the charges, the voice on the other end replied. Emily, how did your session go? It just ended. Did the doctor make the association to the movie? The voice asked. Yes, the woman replied. Did you react the way we practiced? The voice asked. Yes, Dr. Bennett said exactly what you knew he'd say, and I reacted the way you taught me. It was like clockwork. I should be back in court next week. I suspect they'll release me the same day. Emily, this is incredible news, the voice said. Listen closely. The judge may ask where you'll stay upon release. Tell them you'll stay with me, and that I'll get you the care you need. I sent an affidavit to your lawyer. And Emily, whatever you do, do not tell anyone that I'm a psychiatrist. I won't, Mom. Did you get the duffel bag from luggage storage at the airport? I have it, and it's incredible. This changes everything. We're going to have to get you one of those money counting machines. You know what they sound like? Her mother asked. The woman looked around the jail dormitory to see if anyone was looking, and rolled her tongue on the top of her mouth, making a fast clicking noise through her teeth. Then the two women burst into laughter.
Get your copy of The Theater of Magic on Amazon.com.